This is the Insurtech Insights Trust Talks podcast, hosted by Clearspeed. I'm your host, Danny Ngsikwan. In the Trust Talks podcast, we're asking senior insurance leaders for their perspectives on trust in the context of the industry. Why is trust critical? We have Stacey Brown at the table with us today. Stacey's the president of Insurtech America and consultant and advisor to insurance industry tech execs and companies. He also has over 20 years of insurance industry experience, so he'll have a lot of observations to share about what's happening in the industry today. Stacey, thanks for joining us.
Nice to be here, Danny.
Let's get right into it. Insurance, for-profit industry. It's a business. Where do you see money being left on the table? And what can be done to address that?
I think probably one of the biggest challenges right now is just around fraud.
Yeah.
It's always been a problem, and it's not going to stop being a problem anytime soon. In fact, I was at an event last week where the commissioner from North Carolina was on a panel, and they asked him, what keeps you up at night? And he said fraud, because actually with all this AI tech, the bad guys are doing it in volume now, volumes that we've never seen. So it's becoming an even bigger problem.
Absolutely.
Fueled by technology.
Fueled by tech,
yes.
Sophisticated technology, opportunistic fraud at levels that we haven't seen before due to, other pressures, societal things that are going on. So hearing that the commissioner, that keeps the commissioner up at night, do you think it's keeping our insurance leaders up at night? Because I ask you that because there seems to be a bit of 10% of claims are fraudulent and we're still doing business. So we'll just kind of keep going. But it's something that has to change. Would love your perspective on that.
I mean, combined ratio alone keeps executives up at night, right? And it's certainly, loss is a contributing factor. So yeah, I think it's, they don't specifically spend all their days thinking about it. I think a lot of insurance industry leaders tend to be more underwriter focused and underwriting focused, top line and growth, but the claims leaders, for sure.
I want to ask you then, continuing on the fraud aspect, I mean, maybe we can talk a bit about the impact on the insurer, but also the consumer with, an increase in fraud. And then also what can we do if the system's not necessarily working with this larger level of fraud and volume that's happening?
We got to get better at using the tools that we have access to.
Mm-hmm. What's ultimately, and I think this is something I've heard a lot from folks today, talking about, we need to educate our consumers more on what we actually do as insurers so that they understand. What's the impact on the consumer when fraudulent activity continues to happen?
Well, prices rise.
Yes.
Right? Insurance, I own houses and cars, right? So I have to pay these bills too, and rates are going up and it gets painful.
Yes.
We're all paying for it ultimately.
With all of this, so rates are rising, but there's compliance and regulation to think about. There are market caps, there's CAT events, there's all these different things. So things can't keep going exactly the way they are. The system, there are certain parts it's cracking or it's breaking. What do you think might need to change?
I actually have maybe a different angle to go with that.
Would love to hear it.
I don't think it needs to change, because if you take a look, all this increased risk and has been driving premiums.
Mm-hmm.
Go look at the stock market. Go look at the stock prices of all the publicly traded insurance companies in the U.S. over the last 2 years.
Yeah,
huge growth. It's been a very positive thing from a revenue and perspective. Right? Inflation helps insurance, actually.
Yes.
It's kind of weird that way.
Yes. So fair point. And then I want to take us to the customer side for a second here, because obviously there's a perception, so to your point, there's growth on the insurance side, which is great for for-profit businesses, but consumer trust perhaps has taken a hit. And so do you think we've fallen off as an industry there? And if so, where? And what can be done to address it?
Insurance is a big word, right? It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I tell people I work in insurance and they think I'm doing healthcare, right? And it's like, okay, a lot of people, that's what the insurance is for them. It's health insurance. And they only think about car insurance when the bill comes, right? But if they're having health issues, they think a lot about health insurance. And I'd say, that's an industry, and not to pick on it, but it's an industry that I think probably gets a bad rap. And in that, I mean, in P&C, we also aren't angels either. There was a 60 Minutes thing last September where they were interviewing people in Florida who still hadn't gotten their claims processed from like Hurricane Sandy or something like several years ago. And then they went on to talking about how, adjusters were saying that they sent these reports into the insurance company, and the insurance company modified the reports. They took out certain pages, they changed the numbers, and they kind of created their own version of the report. And then went back to the insured and said, yeah, you're, 6-figure loss, we're going to give you $14,000, right? So it was a really bad image that we got from that. And the thing is, in all industries, there's bad actors, there's bad things happening.
Yeah.
We don't like that. But when it gets put under a magnifying glass like that, it doesn't help.
Absolutely not. And interestingly, like those are the only stories that seem to get amplified versus, the net positive outcomes for.
Yeah. You know what the news doesn't talk about? They don't seem to talk about social inflation and these lawsuits that are getting, nuclear and thermonuclear now is the new term I've heard. These verdicts that are starting to get upwards of $1 billion. And, we all pay for that when that happens.
Yes. And I think that goes back to the point about education so that everyone in the ecosystem can better understand how all these parts work together. And then, so to your point, bad actors everywhere. And perhaps the majority of genuine customers, but there are some bad actors now going back to that side who, we talked about fraud, who are submitting fraudulent claims, et cetera. What if there was a way for insurers to more confidently trust the information that they're getting from consumers at the time that they submit a claim? Like, how might that change the way things are done, or how would that impact people, process, business?
Well, I think if it was trusted information, it still might be fraudulent, right? So it's true information, but a bad claim, right?
Interesting.
So that could still happen, I guess. But I think it would certainly make things more efficient, right? If the data was more trusted, for sure, it could help with efficiencies.
Absolutely.
I don't know that like I said, I don't know that it prevents fraud, but it might reduce it. It might, if people know that the information they're submitting will be verified.
Yeah.
Maybe they won't even start the process.
Right. There's a walkaway or withdrawal potential there too, acting as a deterrent factor potentially. And so to your point, it does sound like there's a bit of a people, a tech, a good data thing that all kind of has to work together here. To wrap us up, let me ask you, Stacey, with your many years of experience and also, your consulting and all the folks that you talk to, if there's one thing that you would want leaders who are listening to know, or something you would implore to them, like listen to this, do this now, what would that be?
I know you asked for one thing, but I have two.
Yes, we'll take two.
The first one, take rate. Don't be afraid to take rate, take rate. But number two is don't forget about the customer.
Yeah. Tell me more about don't forget about the customer.
Ultimately, there's a number of things we talked about. There's the need for education.
Yeah.
I think a lot of carriers have gotten better. Like I know my small business insurance, I get regular updates and tips and tricks and stuff from my carrier. So, I'm seeing the industry actually going beyond just collecting premium and sending a bill once a year, right? It's starting to get there, but we just need more of that and more education and maybe even younger education. I don't know that insurance is talked about in high school. I think students first start getting introduced to it when they get a car and they get their license, and that mom and dad saying you got to pay for your insurance, so go get a job, right?
Yes.
But yeah, education, and thinking about how we can help consumers be their own best risk management, risk managers. Yeah,
that's a great point. And actually, to your other point, I did see a study recently that said Gen Z's holding off on buying insurance. Again, perhaps it's a mix of cost, but also education, also wondering how does this apply to my particular lifestyle. So to your point, again, there's a kind of holistic process involved in that to let people know like all the ways in which it applies. So great takeaway, Stacey. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks. Great to be here.